Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the post-Trump era, and of course whether we talk about the Russia and Ukraine war, whether we talk about China and US relations. At a time of heightened geopolitical instability, what can we expect post of course, Trump inauguration, election, what do we expect now? And particularly with regard to the region, our region, as far as Pakistan is concerned, our policies vis-a-vis US is concerned, is there likely to be any change? Whether we look at the China factor, or we look at, for example, military cooperation, areas of mutual interest also, whether we talk about counter-terrorism, all of those are areas of interest now, and whether they're going to be, is there any change expected after the Trump presidency now, and what is likely to be the situation if there's likely to be any change at all? Those are relevant questions that we'll be talking about. I have with me former Ambassador Jamil Khan. Thank you for joining us today. We also have with us Naela Chohan, who is also former ambassador. Thank you for being with us. Muneeb Qadir, who's a lawyer and a senior analyst. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to go to Jamil Saab. Jamil Saab, we've seen, we've spoken about the elections, we've spoken about the inauguration, as far as the presidency is concerned, of course, the oath taking, all of that. Now, how do you see the presidency as it shapes up? We also saw, tech giants at at the inauguration and the events up to that. How do you look at the way things are shaping up? Is there likely, and more relevant now, of course, we've also seen the spate of presidential orders also, and what do they mean? And let's talk about globally how you see things shaping up now when we talk about presidential orders that we've seen also.
Right, we've been discussing, that's right, and then now all what we've been saying and what been discussing, now we can see the impact of it, and what you have just asked me about, how is it going to shape up? Yes, that is the topic which the entire world is trying to explore. Some of it we have already had the anticipation in view of what Donald Trump has been saying during the campaign, and what he has been deciding, and what decisions he's been taking during his the previous term of 2016 to 2016. So we have some indicators to connect and then see how all what he's been saying, and all how it is going to shape up, particularly in light of the first night executive order which he has signed under Article 2 of the United States Constitution, subsection 1. So he has signed all those. What powers he has displayed those powers after taking over the
Ambassador Saab, I'm going to interject. One of the questions that is being talked about now is how much power does a president of the United States actually have when, like you are saying, the presidential orders that we've seen, the executive orders that the spate of them that we've seen, and then also the reaction of the courts. I want to come to this, and I want to talk more about this. Let me include Muneeb in the discussion also. Muneeb, as a lawyer, do you think that, in this part of the world, in our part of the world, perhaps, it is more common than we see in the US, but do you think that there is now, we've also seen Trump say clearly that perhaps, a battle between, a legal battle seems to be on hand. How are you looking at those things when we look at the executive orders, when we look at the role of the US courts also at this time?
Interestingly, a lot of the top judiciary in the US, they were handpicked by Trump himself. I mean, judges like Brett Kavanaugh. And that's why we saw judgments like the overturning of Roe versus Wade, for instance. So I don't think that there's going to be much of a clash. That's a president's prerogative to pass executive orders, but the speed at which Donald Trump is doing that, and on such varied topics, be that gender politics as it is called, or immigration, or climate change. And everybody knows that Donald Trump is a big climate change denier. So on very topics, he has hurriedly passed, presidential orders and executive orders. And what we're seeing, you just talked about, what kinds of powers does the president enjoy? I mean, he's powerful enough to relieve the 6th January Capitol attack insurrectionists of any liability. And that's what he's done by virtue of yet another executive order, pardoned them all, and termed the insurrection attempt on 6th January 2021 as just minor incidents. So what agenda he is now going to pursue is going to be very much in line with what he did in his first administration as well. As regards his foreign policy, he's very much the same, in that he wants to cut US's contribution to NATO, has backed out of the WHO, wants to impose trade tariffs on Canada and the European Union, and doesn't really believe in much of a of a globalist agenda. It's more of an isolationist agenda as far as foreign trade is concerned. So I think that we are going to see glimpses of exactly what we saw during his first administration. And I think that a lot of his administration, they're ideologically so aligned with what he represents and what he stands for, that I don't think that there's going to be much of an obstacle in him pursuing this agenda.
Let me go to Naela, and then on that note, Naela, I don't know if you heard Muneeb, but he's saying that there seems to be little chance of much conflict as far as Donald Trump and his overall, the US, whether we look at the judiciary or whether we look at the executive overall and the courts, there seems little chance that there will be any kind of opposition. Do you agree with that? And secondly, another question, the way that the speed at which that we've seen these executive orders come in, what was the need to be so quick? Is it because he wants to set a tone for the future? That he wants, of course, we've seen a lot of hyperbole, we've seen a lot of stuff that has been said by Donald Trump on the fact that he wants things quickly. We know that he is also not necessarily going to follow the traditional route, and is that more of that going to come out in the coming months?
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me to your program. Excuse me. Actually, I think the speed with which he has started is to appease his voters, that he will live up to his promises. In his last term, if you recall, there were certain promises he fulfilled, there were others that he did not. And here it created that vacuum. But now, with the speed he took over, firstly, he wants to clean his slate. So he wants to put all the blame on Biden and not on himself, because as you see, when he sent Mitkoff to Israel, it was basically to show that he's a deal maker and he will make the deal. So this is how he's starting off, and I think it may not exactly be a replica of his earlier one, but there will be similarities. So it will be a interesting term that he has, because Trump now wants to show to the world that it is America first. He's a deal maker. He's bringing in all these rich billionaires. So it will be corporate America that will be really running the show. There'll be many interesting developments, Mahrukh. So I don't think that we should stereotype it. He's an unpredictable person anyway, so you can't really say this is how it's going to be or not.
In terms of, Naela, what about in terms of, we've seen when we look at Palestine and Israel, in other areas, let's talk about the kind of drift or the kind of direction the foreign policy of the US is likely to take. Like you said, he's unpredictable, but he also made certain promises to start off with, of course, America first and all of that he said. what does that really mean will come out in these, in the next couple of months, some of which is already starting, right?
Yes, you're right. Some of it is starting. But if you recall, in his first term, he had made Jerusalem the capital of Israel. They put their embassy there. While this time he made promises to Muslim Arabs also, American voters of Arab origin, assuring them that he will end the war, he will bring peace. But Palestine, the Palestinians are still not sure what will be the cost of that peace.
Right. Let me come back to you, Naela. I think there's a problem with audio. Ambassador Saab, the same question to you. As far as the foreign policy is concerned, as far as the direction of the foreign policy is concerned, whether we look at China, whether we look at Russia and Ukraine, the situation there, what kind of a shape, what kind of, do you see immediate things happening? Do you think that, events are going to happen that are going to have an immediate effect on these, these places in the world and the way things are at this time, whether we look at, again, Russia and Ukraine, or for example, China?
No, it would have about three dimensions, but let me go through the first one, Gaza and the Middle East, basically. And then the second dimension is the containment of China. And third dimension of the topmost foreign policy of the United States these days is the Ukraine. So first thing first, because we are mostly impacted and affected by the Middle Eastern situation. So let me touch upon that first. I will just quote here the speech which Donald Trump has delivered on 25th, just about 2 days ago, one day. And in that he says, and it's really quite concerning, that relocating of over 1 million Palestinians to Jordan or Egypt, and he has asked for some allocation of the area for them. And I would like to remind your viewer that the same kind of requirement was given initially during Joe Biden time, but that was not made as public like a speech of a president. It was just behind the door, or it's a track to diplomacy that they asked Sinai Desert from Egypt to settle the Palestinians, relocate them and settle them there. But at that time, Egypt was reluctant, and this time, let's see what way Egypt is going to agree and what way Jordan, because these two countries have been pointed out in the speech of the 25th, just about 2 days ago. And he's also asking the same speech with the same length and breadth of his. He said that the Arab nations are required to build the housing, and it's a regional problem of the Palestinian Gaza. So he wants that expenses, which is about 50 billion, by the way, dollars of expenditure, which is it's going to take, and more than 1 decade it's going to take to reconstruct or rehabilitate about 80% of the buildings, which is not even livable. And he also describes Gaza as a real mess. And I'll also draw the attention of your viewer that during last term, in violation of the Security Council resolution, he had recognized the Golan Heights as the sovereign territory of Israel. And my colleague Naila has already mentioned about the shifting of the capital. Again, that is not only against the Security Council resolutions violation, but it is also totally against the OIC Charter. And OIC Charter, in the very preamble of para 16 of the OIC Charter, it supports the struggle of the Palestinian people, and it opposes the occupation of Israel, and it emphasizes to empower Palestinian to the right of self-determination and establish sovereign state with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. So that is violated.
Talk about Ambassador. When we talk about this, let me go to Muneeb. Muneeb, I think Ambassador is very sufficiently sort of summed up where and how Donald Trump seems to be deviating from what is the normal procedure, and the speed, of course. But what about those voters? Initially, of course, he said that he would end this war during the first week of his presidency. Then he also, the vote bank of those Muslim voters, of Muslim origin, who voted for him. It seems to have been, it's going to be a rather rude kind of awakening for that vote bank, no?
Absolutely, but at least I could see it coming already. I understood that that was his campaign in which he was trying to woo the, Muslim voters and wanted to keep them on his side. And he kept on saying that he would end all the wars, not just in Israel. Not just between Israel and Gaza, but also between Russia and Ukraine. And a lot of people thought that, he lived up to his promise with the recent so-called ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. But then, today what he's said, practically, that goes completely against the spirit of what a ceasefire is all about. And a ceasefire is where you and I'm saying between Israel and civilians of Gaza, actually, where you enter into a framework collectively on equal terms. I think that this so-called ceasefire was really, Trump and all those who exercise and wield the greatest power in the international stage having imposed their own terms on the ordinary people of Gaza. And so Trump has just, announced that he intends to clean Gaza up. And when he says clean Gaza up, he's talking about resettling Gaza civilians elsewhere in Jordan and in Egypt. And might I add that according to the Fourth Geneva Convention, forcible transfer of populations counts as a war crime. So I don't know how he can say that so casually, because displacing civilians and expressing your intention that you intend never ever to let them return back to their lands or whatever little is left of them. I think that just highlights that Trump is a hardliner pro-Israeli, and he has never made any secret of it, because the person that he's just appointed as ambassador to Israel, that person does not even recognize Palestine at all. So there you go. And during his last administration, as my co-panelists have also pointed out, he announced Jerusalem as the Israeli capital. So his is a very hardline approach, and he has never made any secret of being extremely pro-Israel in his stance. Now, would that fall in line with the right side of international law? That's anybody's guess. So there you have it.
Even, whether it falls in the right side of international law, we know that, as we've been talking about the unpredictable nature that Donald Trump is known for, and is, that's who he is, or what he's shown himself to be in his previous presidency also. But the fact that, things like, for example, climate change and his, let me go to Naela on this. Naela, as far as, for example, climate change is concerned, and the way that, the denial of its effects, and, of course, the way that countries like, for example, Pakistan also, less than 1% emitters of fossil fuel, the way that we continue to suffer, the way that, we've seen weather patterns, we've seen, overall the effects of climate change, the way that they are happening all over the world. With a person like Trump, this is, something one can say nothing short of disaster when we look at particularly this issue, no?
Well, it will be very challenging for the world, because if you have been following COP29 also, climate justice, the fund, I don't think USA is going to contribute to it. They have sent their delegation to participate, but it was a low-level delegation in COP29. Can you hear me?
Naela, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, so in COP29, the American delegation was a low-level delegation. It was deliberately done so. And although Biden government was not that supportive of climate change, but Trump is a climate change denier. That's totally different.
Saying
And
yes.
if USA pulls out of COP29, I mean the next COP, which will be COP30, the world will suffer, especially the small Pacific Island countries where now USA is in trying to invest to counter China. Uh, they will be suffering if USA pulls out of this climate change dialogue. Similarly, as you said, Pakistan, with minimal carbon emission, is one of the largest victims of climate change. I think we rate around fifth in the world suffering from climate change, and we do not have wherewithal to manage such a large population, displacement, suffering due to, they're called climate refugees, climate change refugees. We won't be able to deal with that. So there will be a lot of, complications in the coming times as far as climate change is concerned.
Right. Let me go to Ambassador. I'll come back to you, Ambassador. For example, again, if you heard Naela, she's saying that, of course, with the person, the thing about the US is that when we started talking about the Palestine and Israel war, it was something I don't, I think maybe you said, or that there is that one country that can make a difference, and unfortunately or fortunately that one country is the US. And that's not just about, and I hope I'm not taking a simplistic view here, but it's not just about Palestine and Gaza. It's about a host of other issues where a country like the US, or a country that is the US, can and has the potential to make that huge difference. So that is why, with a person like Donald Trump at the helm of affairs, it's extremely important to be able to understand how his mind is going to work with regard to these issues, right?
Well, I think in order to understand this very point, we need to also understand what's the mechanism, how the influence and the pressure is put on the entire Congress, as well as the Treasury benches and the State Department and various other departments of United States, basically, and even in UNO. So the Israeli lobby is very strong. So I'll leave it here because we've been discussing it. But let me attempt to respond to your question. Basically, yes, United States is the only power which matters in terms of Israel, and it's the only power which supports Israel, besides many other. But this is the only superpower, I would say, which supports Israel, without which Israel cannot stand on its feet, and without which Israel cannot really violate all the international laws. Israel cannot annex West Bank. Israel cannot unilaterally declare Jerusalem as the capital. So Israel cannot really flout with the International Criminal Court and with the warrants of the International Criminal Court. Israel cannot really flout with the Security Council resolution, which was passed as a result of 1967 war, 6 Days War, 1973 war, 1982 war, 2006 Lebanon war, 2023 Gaza war. All these, there are six. Last one, Gaza. There are six United Nations Security Council resolution. Israel didn't really bother about it. So these are sufficient argument to say that all these the warships which is deployed in the Mediterranean Sea and at the Red Sea in support of Israel are there, and it is sufficient to say that the United States has supplied 8,500 tons of the explosive and arms and ammunition, which is against the United States' own constitution, that those weapons cannot be used by the recipient country to kill the civilians, innocent civilians. So what are we talking about? And then Oslo Accord, as Donald Trump has just day before yesterday said that there should be one state theory. The ambassador who has been, who is going to now become the ambassador of the United States to Israel, You heard my colleague Ambassador Chohan that he doesn't believe in two-state theory. So therefore, this Oslo Accord of which was signed on the 13th September 1993 between Clinton and the Israel PM Rabin and Arafat, that seems that and that, by the way, this Oslo Accord has been ratified by the United Nations. But again, they are going to just throw it in the dustbin. They are this times it appears that they are in a mood, and then Donald Trump is not the same president which it was in the 2016. This time he has come with the power of lower house and upper house, all the powers he has. He has more experience of running a government. He has more experience to really make sure that the
And we
opposition
can
and the
expect him,
bureaucracy.
therefore, to be more aggressive, perhaps, if that's the right word to use. Let me go to Muneeb on this. Muneeb, let's talk about China. Let's talk about the US and China, and later of how that can affect Pakistan also, and the fact that of course we are a close ally of China overall. How do you see things shaping up with regard to the US policy? We've also of course seen a lot of announcements with regard to that by Donald Trump.
Yes, so international media is replete with reports that perhaps Trump 2.0 is going to be more lenient on China, will go easier on China, softer on China, because we've heard that and it's been announced, it's out there in the media that Donald Trump had a very cordial phone conversation with Xi Jinping, the Chinese president. And among the matters that were discussed between them, one of the most controversial recently has been the TikTok app, which Donald Trump has wanted to put a ban on, and then through an executive order that ban has been stayed for a while. But the Western world at large, and it's not just United States of America, the Western world has been very skeptical about China and its aims. I've just mentioned TikTok. They see that as a tool at the behest of the at the disposal of the Chinese regime, through which they can keep tabs on their international rivals. And even in the United Kingdom, they were going to enter into a 5G contract with Huawei. But then again, they came up with this stance that this is going to be used as a spying tool by the Chinese authorities. So there is an element of distrust. Actually, not an element. Distrust is exactly what defines, the relationship between the West and China. And perhaps it's because China is an emerging power. And that is something that does not accord well with the Western world and the kind of hegemony that they enjoyed on the international plane. So I think that just as many of my co-panelists have pointed out that, Trump is unpredictable. He might say one thing at a time and then say quite the opposite at another given time. So I think that there is going to be a lot of friction and tension between Trump and the Chinese administration, and more so, recently a report has been brought out in the public, according to which the American administration, actually the Biden administration, had come to the conclusion that there was, according to them, credible evidence that COVID pandemic had spread due to a Wuhan lab leak. And I think that Trump is going to capitalize on that as well, because he used to always call it the Chinese pandemic, when he was the president previously. So I don't think that, things are going to get any better between China and Trump. I think that aggressive rhetoric from both the sides, it's only going to multiply.
Fair enough. Naila, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Ji, I hear you. Naila, let's talk closer to home, and how things are. We've had a lot of talk about Donald Trump and whether there can be an effect, or whether we can expect some kind of an intervention in our domestic politics. I don't particularly want to focus about that, because it's already been talked about enough. We know that a lot of that was just has been rumor mongering, and we've seen a lot of that is just one can say propaganda. But overall, in terms of US tilt that we've seen, even with Biden administration, as far as, for example, India is concerned, do you expect that to continue?
Well, to be honest, Mahrukh, if you look at Mr. Donald Trump's strategy, as I said, they're business people. If they see any business benefit from something, they will do it. If they don't, they will not bother. I don't think Pakistan or its domestic politics are of any significance to Mr. Donald Trump or his businesses. So it is unlikely that he will take out time to worry about it. He might have made promises to certain, quarters of our diaspora, but knowing the way he is, I don't think he would have time enough to worry about it as much as he has other bigger things on his platter.
But okay, fair enough. I mean, in terms of the domestic politics, right? But as far as his U.S. and its policy as far as India is concerned, and of course, the potential, like you said, that they see in India, and business relations and all of that. So you expect that that is likely to continue. We also saw, of course, notable Indians at the inauguration also, and overall that relationship. Do you expect that to continue?
Well, I think we should have, a more prudent approach towards how the new systems are evolving. If you see, Mr. Modi was not invited to the inaugural ceremony. That itself is a statement. Jaishankar represented India, not Mr. Modi. That should be seen in its right context, although Indian media is covering it up and, they're trying to create a fluff around it. But I don't think that Mr. Trump is that worried because, well, they were trying to build up India against China. But Mr. Trump's anti-China is more on tariffs and trade rather than using India or Quad. So I don't know how relevant Quad would be in his scheme of things.
Okay, fair enough. Ambassador, do you agree with what Naela is saying? She's saying that it doesn't, and of course, she's very rightly pointed out the omission of someone like President Modi from the inauguration, and the fact that it has to be seen in the right context to quote her. How do you look at it?
But the bigger question is that how many head of states or head of government have participated? If we take a look at that, perhaps we'll get the answer. Not very many, perhaps one or two. But then even their foreign minister, the external minister, who participated in that, so that by itself is significant. But we're talking about the Quads, and we're talking about the India. India and United States have already there were 7 different agreements among them, and the chiefly it's the defense cooperation agreement in which they have even extended them with the facility of their Gujarat base, naval base, and there are a lot of activities from that base. So I'll just leave that there by just building my argument that yes, they have signed agreement, and it's a strategic relation with India in the context of China containment. And to what extent that context Donald Trump would like to weaken, I doubt it, because the moment their Secretary of State, which is the Foreign Minister of the United States, Secretary of State Rubio, after taking over, after being ratified by the Congress, the first meeting he held was that of Quads. So that shows the significance, and that speaks the mind of Donald Trump and the government and the United States, that they do attach significance to this China containment, and therefore Quad. And then next meeting, what I'm expecting in coming few days is AUKUS meeting. So this would remain, to my understanding and to my analysis, this would remain as one of the topmost policies of United States and also the Middle East. So we are affected. The Pakistan is affected by both of it, the Middle East policy of the foreign policy, as well as
Do you think that
China
when you say
containment.
that, Ambassador, when you say that Pakistan is affected, What kind of changes do you anticipate? Let's be a little specific with regard to, particularly as far as, both the Quad and China also, and overall this relationship.
Now, here are the bullet points. Now, if the United States further become aggressive in implementing the containment of China, because in the diplomacy, basically it's the consistency and continuity. I can see that the United States is going to continue with their policy, and the consistency it will maintain. But how aggressive they are going to be in this context, that we will see it in coming few weeks, I would say. But then Pakistan would start having a little more pressure in that case uh, to avoid some of the facilities extended to China, which in terms of giving the access to the Gawada. And I think
Okay.
if I leave it here, that would be better, because
Right.
there are
Fair
so
enough.
many things. Gawada access would give China an advantage from about 14,000 kilometers, and it would reduce to 5,000 road kilometers, and it would reduce from 2 months to only 7 days distance. So that is, and then it would save them from OCAS deployment and the deployment of the other allied countries of the United States. So if I
Right.
leave it
Fair enough.
here, we will
Right. I
understand that.
understand. I understand, Ibbas. Let me go to Muneeb. Muneeb, as far as Pakistan is concerned, whether leaving our domestic politics aside, there's a, as far as our legacy of our relationship with the US is concerned. To use a word that has often been used, it's been transactional. Do you expect that, that to continue? As far as, Ambassador said, of course, with regard to China, Gwadar, all of that, keeping that in mind, perhaps we can expect a more, can we expect more engagement or a better level of engagement?
It really depends on how the US views Pakistan right now, because after the withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021, which was actually, that withdrawal was authored by Donald Trump himself through the Doha talks in alliance with Zalmay Khalilzad and everything. So the USA does not really need Pakistan as far as Afghanistan is concerned. But all I'm saying is that Pakistan, the way that where we are located on the world map, it does make us an important strategic ally in some ways, much more than one would deem obvious, because just our immediate neighborhood. I do understand that with India, the USA and Trump administration, they do have a strategic alliance, and in fact, actually, Donald Trump shares a very good vibe with Narendra Modi, for whom he had hosted a Howdy Modi event when he was the president the last time. And he also had gone to India when the Delhi riots were taking place in 2020. So India he's going to use to get to China. And I think that the United States of America might be a bit wary of the fact that Pakistan and China, they deem one another, as all-weather friends. But that does not necessarily mean that, Pakistan cannot be a useful partner in terms of trade and certain shared common goals in the long run. So, I mean, Pakistan retaining good relations with China is not mutually exclusive with Pakistan also enjoying good, at least cordial relations with America. And also because if I were to speak of the region, there's also Iran, which borders us, which is our neighbor. And Trump's relation with Iran has always been very volatile. If one remembers what happened in 2020 when General Qasem Soleimani had been assassinated, and then Trump also, backtracked from the JCPOA, the nuclear sanctions agreement that Obama had agreed with Iran. So, given Pakistan's strategic position, I mean, in geographical terms, the United States of America, the USA might have a lot to gain by fostering good relations, at least cordial relations with Pakistan. I mean, let's see. Only time will tell.
Right, fair enough. Naela, I'd like your quick comments. We're running out of time, but overall, on what you expect with regard to the US and Pakistan engagement, in the next couple of months.
I think a lot depends on how our leadership deals with the new developments. As Muneeb said, Pakistan's geostrategic location will be very important. And my friend Ambassador Sahab also said that although we are talking about India's importance, but 80,000 Indians are going to be deported in this immigration program that Trump is going to put in. So really, it's a very complicated relationship. I wouldn't be that sure of how India is going to participate with its relations with USA. That's why probably they settle their border problems with China also. I think we have to be very clear that China is our friend, but USA, we have historically very well-founded relationship, and we should worry more about our trade relations with USA, and hopefully it will be a positive development.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us today. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you for being with us, Ambassador Jamil. Thank you for joining us today, Ambassador Naela Chohan. Thank you for being with us today, Muneeb Qadir. Thank you for your time. Overall, of course, at this time, we expect the US, of course, in terms of our geostrategic position, Pakistan will remain important and has continued to remain important. What the level of engagement as far as the Pakistan and US is concerned will be, next couple of months will of course determine that. But a lot of other events like we talked about are going to be important, whether we look at deportation of such a huge number of Indians are concerned with regard to the relationship that India and the US has. Our relationship with the US and particularly keeping in view our relationship with China and US also, all of that today we've discussed, and that will perhaps determine what the level of that engagement will be. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.